Welcome to Issues and Answers with your host, Diane Kinderwater. Issues and Answers is presented as a public service to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. And now, Issues and Answers with your host, Diane Kinderwater.
Welcome to the program. I'm Diane Kinderwater. The 2022 legislative session is over, and never in our history does it seem that we had so many tax dollars to deal with. To spend or not to spend, to save, to give back and tax rebates. We have an election year, and things were certainly different during this legislative session than past ones when we didn't seem to have any money. We have an $8.6 billion budget to run state government. It's a 14% increase over past budget. We have in our reserves 30% to save for perhaps a rainy day if we need it. I think that's about $2 billion. And we have spent, or we will be spending, if we can. How can you spend $1 billion in capital outlay for bridges and roads and armories and whatever else can be spent on capital outlay? Well, we have all the answers from our guest today. It's State Senator Gerald Ortiz. Pino, he was with us before the session. Now he's with us after the session to give us a rundown on what happened in the session and what didn't happen during a 22 legislative session that affects your and my life. So please stay with us as we learn more about that $8.6 billion budget and what it's going to do for us. Stay with us.
The National Education Association of New Mexico, a union of teachers and school staff, believes every child deserves to learn at a school that inspires their imagination, cultivates their curiosity, and ensures a fulfilling life. Public schools should provide all our students with small class sizes and one-on-one attention. NEA New Mexico asks you to join us so together we can end the teacher and staff shortage and invest in our public education system once and for all. Sponsored by NEA New Mexico.
Education is another big change. We didn't even mention it at my intro. My gosh, school teachers are going to be getting large reaches. Just many, many, many topics to talk about. And we are so grateful to have Senator Gerald Ortiz Pino back on the program. Not only on our program, but serving the state of New Mexico for how many years now?
Well, this was my 18th year.
18th year. Mm-hmm. And you're one of the, I'll call seasoned senators.
Thank you. That's a much better term than old. I prefer that.
Experienced, seasoned. How was the session for you? And you're the one who told me, my gosh, you haven't ever seen so much money. Billions, and it's still increasing because the taxes on the oil and gas industry and the price of gas.
Well, and it's hard to believe that just a few short years ago, we were faced with having to make cuts because we had not enough money to cover the basics of state government. And oil and gas, well, two things. I think first, there was an awful lot of federal money poured into the state to help with the recovery. And so that then kicked up just regular tax increase, tax revenues, things like sales tax, things like income tax, corporate tax.
Because people got more money in their pockets and they started spending and they spent it, and then we tax that and that goes into the state coffers.
That's right. So that helped. But of course, the big factor has been the price of oil in the state has stayed up. You know, we've always had ups and downs. For the last 3 years now, it's consistently been climbing. A few years ago, we were at $40 a barrel. Then it was at 60. This year, we were routinely at 70 and 80. I looked at the paper this morning, $110 a barrel. That's $30 a barrel more than we factored into the budget. So next year, there will be this other additional bonanza coming in that we won't even be talking about today because we won't realize it till next year, but that's the trend. It's up, up, up. And unfortunately, when a war like the one in Ukraine starts, the same thing happened, if you remember, when there was the war in Iraq. The price of oil immediately jumped. The state sees a big surge in revenue. Then when peace starts, the price comes back down, and we have to be careful that we haven't started spending at a level that can't be maintained. So that's the tension. We have a lot of money. We had a lot of needs because we didn't have money for so long. So our schools and our infrastructure has just gotten really decrepit. You know, we have a lot of buildings that don't have regular maintenance, a lot of roofs that have to be fixed, a lot of water systems that are going bad, a lot of dams that need to be propped up and protected from having breaches. So,
and that's the capital outlay money.
That's the capital outlay.
That's over $1 billion, and as I mentioned, it's kind of tough to spend.
Well, but besides that, don't forget, we're going to get this enormous infusion of federal money from the federal infrastructure bill that the state is going to get about $2 billion more for. So all of a sudden, if you want to be in a new business in New Mexico, get into the road construction or water line construction or broadband construction, because all of those are going to be getting huge, enormous increases in spending by the government, and that's going to translate into jobs if we have the workers. Because the other thing we ran into this year was department after department of state government and the school teachers, school systems, saying they can't find workers. There are 1,000 vacancies in our schools today as we sit here. And we've increased the pay, but if the teachers aren't out there, it's going to be really, and the same thing with police, the same thing with corrections officers at our prisons and jails. We have a tremendous need. Oh, and all the departments of state government. We talked with, for example, the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, which is a nice, white-collar kind of job. People there earn $30,000 to $40,000 a year. You'd think that would be a place where new graduates from social work and psychology and sociology programs would be eager to get into. They can't fill vacancies. They're running over 30% vacancies in that division right now. And that's across the board.
And what's the reason for, we're getting off the topic, we'll go back to how we're going to spend it, but we know that we see the storefronts with all the signs, but
exactly.
What do you believe as a senator representing part of Albuquerque, what is, I know what my belief is about the reason, but you are a representative. What is the reason why people are not working?
Well, I think they're working. We have our unemployment is coming down. The unemployment rolls are down, down, down. And yet people can't find employees. And I think there's two factors there. One is a lot of people have taken retirement. They got sick with COVID. They decided they could retire. They just took advantage of that opportunity to get out because they were staying home with the kids anyhow, so it made it a lot easier to retire. Or they wanted to start a business of their own, or they could work from home, or they could write the great American novel. Lots of reasons why people suddenly decided, I don't want to go back into that crazy rat race, just constantly rushing around trying to earn a living when I have options. And all of a sudden they started seeing new options. They became Uber drivers, or they did some kind of work from home. And so it became possible. And I think the other thing, of course, is we don't have a growing population. Our population in New Mexico, probably nationally too, is flat.
Yeah.
After 10 years, we had a 2% increase in population, and much of that was people outside of the age of workforce, and either young kids or old people. So our workforce is shrinking, and we don't have, for years, the reason we had a growing workforce was we had a lot of immigration. We had a lot of people coming into New Mexico looking for jobs. They were from Mexico. They were from Central America. They might not have had documents, but they were willing to work, and they worked at any and all jobs. When we put a stop to that, it really has reduced the number of available workers in positions that used to be filled by the immigrant population.
You didn't mention, and this is what my belief was, the folks who got on unemployment and got a healthy amount of money from the state and from the federal government were making more money on unemployment than in their jobs. Do you believe that's a factor of them saying, I don't want to go back, I'm getting more on unemployment? They got a taste of that? But
they don't get it now. Those were during the COVID times, and so those programs have all basically ended. So, you would have thought if that were the case, once they end, they're sitting home doing nothing. There's just not, we don't see that going on.
But they're still getting state unemployment, not that extra $400.
Well, but it expires after, it's not in perpetuity. Your state unemployment expires, I think, after 26 weeks, so half a year. And most of them have used that up. So it was that additional federal boost that they were existing on, so they could. So I think it's those other two factors that our workforce is shrinking, and that a lot of people are deciding they'd rather work on their own. They're still working, but they're not willing to work
In the rat
as
race.
a waiter or
It was
a
rat race.
dishwasher or a roofer.
Okay.
Yeah.
A concern I would have as a member of the public regarding this $1 billion and now another infusion of $2 billion from the federal government of infrastructure money. Do you think that there's limited amount of supplies, limited employees?
We're going to
Is
run
that
into-
going to increase the price of all these projects?
It already is. It already is. The supplies, the raw materials, and then the equipment that you need to all of those have gone up enormously.
So we're not going to get as much of a bang for our buck as the $1 billion.
That's right. No, exactly. $1 billion today wouldn't buy what $1 billion a couple of years ago would have bought. That's
Just
absolutely
a couple of years
right.
ago. Okay. But there's some important projects, and then you named
enormous.
quite a few of them.
Well, and buildings. One of the big things we're going to see is, for example, at UNM, there will be 2 large new academic buildings built, things that have been on the drawing board for a long time. For the state campus, they're going to replace the Concha Ortiz Pino building on South Capitol. That whole block is going to be devoted to a brand new large state office building that'll have, I forget, 200,000 square feet of office space. So that'll make it possible for a lot of state employees who are working in rented space now to come together into another large
all these programs, projects that were on the drawing board for decades.
That was 10 years. For 10 years, I remember Senator Engel talking about that 10 years ago. That's where we're going to build the new state office building, and pointing to the little houses there across the street.
How much time do we have to spend this $1 billion and the $2 billion coming from the federal
Well, the $2
government?
billion coming from the federal infrastructure money, I think that'll be spendable over 3 or 4 years. The $1 billion this year is for this year. If we don't spend it this year, it reverts. It becomes part of our reserves. I mean, we don't lose it, but and we can reprogram it. The big problem is trying to get the workers out there to build the roads, to dig the trenches for the water lines, to do all the work. We have a real challenge. It's going to be hard to spend $1 billion.
It's going to be hard. Oh, what a problem to have. But it is that
Much
is actually
better than
serious.
if we had to cut.
Yeah.
Those cuts were what was just awful when you had to lay people off.
One area that's near and dear to your heart is regarding behavioral health. You're the chairman of the Health and Human Service Department for the Health and Human Service Committee for the State Senate, and behavioral health is something that you've been talking about for decades.
Right.
So
No,
what's
we have.
going?
And one of the big things, and it's not directly behavioral health, but it is part of what our committee looked at, was eliminating the waiting list for the Developmental Disability Waiver Program. Under Medicaid, the state for years has had an enriched program that would pay for the services needed to keep people out of nursing homes or assisted care homes if they were developmentally disabled. But we didn't have enough money to serve everybody, so the feds allowed us to create a waiting list. Well, that waiting list at this point is larger, has more people on the waiting list than are getting services. The waiting list now, it'll take 12 years for somebody who gets on the waiting list this year, before the changes we made in the session. It would take 12 years. They would be, in middle school age before they could actually get services if they were just newborn. What we were able to do with the combination of some of the federal money and state money is to start a process over the next 3 years that will result in the waiting list being eliminated. We will gradually add people to the program. Now, the problem there is the same one as spending the $1 billion on infrastructure. Where do you find the people to take care of them? Where do you find the workers, the attendants, and the therapists who work with them? So hopefully we'll be gearing that up as well. And in our budget, we've done a lot of work on trying to find training money and other things that will give us the workforce we need to provide the services to the people on that waiting list. But that'll happen over 3 years.
And these are folks who would be young people, for the most part, staying in their homes, or if they go to public school, you'd have an attendant helping them as well?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and of course it goes up. Adults also begin getting can continue receiving these services that they need in order to avoid going into a nursing home. And so the general rule is if it costs less than it would cost to keep them in a nursing home, then it would work.
Very good.
So they would be able to live in their own home, on their own if they're high enough functioning, or possibly in a group home with some services, or possibly with, with their own families. So all of those are options under that waiver program, and hopefully we'll see enough of a change in that we can eliminate the waiting list for it, because that's been unconscionable for a long time. We've had people who really needed the services, and they said, well, you got to wait.
Now that waiting list could be over if we find the employees to help and be trained in that area.
Right.
This $8.5 billion budget, again, a 14% increase. We're addressing some needs that need to be done, but what's interesting, we pointed out during the last census, our state growth is relatively flat.
2%. It went up 2%.
Pretty much flat, yet we have a 14% increase in spending taxpayer dollars. That's right. That's huge.
Yes. No, it is. And part of it is because for a long time we haven't, for example, state employees have had, either zero raises. A couple of years they didn't get a raise, and we added the cost of their insurance to what they had to pay themselves, or their retirement program. We had to pay more of that themselves. So they've been flat or even worse off than they would have been otherwise for a long time. So to catch up now, we have this big jump in spending, 7% raises for state employees and school teachers.
So it's a 7% for state employees, 7%
yes, 7% raises to try to catch up with what's gone on. Now, school teachers, we've also changed those three tiers. It used to be 30,000, 40,000, 50,000. It's now up to 50, 60, 70,000 for the various educational background and experience backgrounds that you start at. So this is our hope, that we'll be able to attract people back into the field who, for example, last year, fewer than 100 people in the whole state graduated with degrees in education.
Repeat that, Senator Ortiz Pino.
Last year, we added up all the graduates in education in all the universities in the state, and it was less than 100. So we're never going to fill the 1,000 vacancies if we can't change that. So the idea is to make it a much more attractive career for people to get into.
And again, that starting salary, I think now $50,000 is really over a 9-month period.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what
right.
the workload is, 9 months.
Well, we have added another week of school time. For most of them, they'll be working an extra week. So it's whatever.
If you do the math, I mean, if they're interested in becoming a teacher, they can think that is just about 9 months to receive $50,000 rather than working another job. You work 12 months for that $50,000.
And that'll move us to about the midpoint of all the states for how teachers are paid, and all the states will be right about at the midpoint. Now, of course, what we want to see is performance improving as well. We want to see our kids becoming better prepared for careers, college, work in the world of business.
And we've changed the education program, the college. What do they call it? Free college as well.
We have, yes, that's the other.
It used to be called the legislative scholarship program.
We still have, it's a combination of the two, the lottery scholarship and of what's called the opportunity scholarship for those that, for whatever reason, don't qualify for lottery. For example, you have to go straight in from high school. Opportunity, you could have been out for a year or two. You might have been on the lottery. Your grades dropped, or you had to go to work, and so you left college. You could come back now under the opportunity, so that essentially anybody who wants to go to 4-year or 2-year schools in this state will not have to pay tuition out of their own pocket. Now, they still have books, some other expenses, and certainly living expenses. That doesn't go away. But this should be a real boost to our workforce. We're trying to have a workforce that's prepared for the 21st century, and that's what we're after.
But free education for virtually anyone who can qualify for
and people who want to return to college, who maybe been out, started 20 years ago, got married, raised a family, now they want to get back in. They also could qualify for the opportunity.
And that's just for the 2-year, 4-year kind of undergraduate degrees, not going towards master.
We don't have a program yet for graduate school or professional school. But the 2-year programs do include a lot of certificate programs, like in welding and carpentry and electricians and plumbing, things like that really could prepare people for good paying jobs, for which there are an enormous shortage right now.
Tax cuts were also, of course, we
Yes.
mentioned this this is an election year. I know for years they discussed eliminating the second tax, I call it, on Social Security income. We
Yeah.
pay that right when they take it out of our checks. We pay income tax on that. In New Mexico, I think we're only one of 13 that taxed it when you start taking out your Social Security. But now,
Well, yeah, we did. Now, we did put a cap on it. People that make over $100,000 a year, they don't get that particular deduction. But for people who make less than $100,000 a year, their Social Security benefits will be
exempt from taxation?
exempt from taxation. And I'm not sure how the dynamics of
Yeah.
that work, because you know the way New Mexico does taxes, or personal income taxes, we just take the line item off of the federal form and use that as the basis. But they'll have a way of computing that, and probably a separate line item in the state
And that could
tax
attract
form.
more seniors to
I
our
think
state.
so.
Or keep
Well,
them
at least
here.
keep them here.
Keep 'em here.
They weren't going anywhere in the first place. Seniors tend to love New Mexico for a lot of reasons, and it may be aggravating that our Social Security are taxed, but this will help, I think. And veterans as well.
And
Veterans pay-
military
Yeah, military veterans will also have their military pensions untaxed.
That's big. Again, something, having worked in the legislature for decades, they discussed trying to eliminate those taxes. And
Yes, yeah.
I call it an election year. It's been done.
Yeah, and again, the same kind of ceiling, so that if if a five-star general retires here and he's making $200,000 in his pension, it's just the amount up to $100,000 that's tax exempt.
And a little bit of a break on the grocery receipts. Really,
Quarter cent.
I call it
Yeah.
kind of minor.
Yeah.
We had all. I mean, why? And that's 0.025.
Yeah, I mean, if you spend $100, it would be $2.50. No, it wouldn't be. It would be 25 cents. It'd be 25
Kind of
cents.
minor.
Yeah.
I mean,
But it-
we could have done, well, was there any discussion? I mean, that's a lot of money.
Well-
And again, these are taxpayers getting, any rebates coming back to
Yes,
people?
yeah, there'll be a rebate. There will be a $250 a person rebate, $500 for a married couple filing jointly, that will be mailed out sometime this late spring, early summer. So that's not, that's
Okay.
it's an effort at spreading some of this bonanza back to the people who helped create
Yeah.
the bonanza in the first place. And there's a child credit, a state child credit of $250 per child that also will be forthcoming.
Is it 500 per child or 250?
I thought it was 250, but maybe it's 500.
Could be,
You may.
could be 500. That's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money per child. Regarding crime, now
The crime
one bill
package.
that didn't, I mean, they say there's a sweeping crime package, but one that did not pass, which there was a lot of discussion, I think we even
Yeah.
talked about it, is the one regarding people who are charged with a crime and they were supposed to be able to prove before they were released on bail that they would not be a threat to our community, because we know we have a crime problem, obviously a crime problem
Yeah.
in Albuquerque, but that failed. That's part of the sweeping crime plan, which I thought was a big point of
Yeah,
discussion.
the DA here in Bernalillo County, and the DAs generally around the state, when UNM shared their study, they did a special study. It didn't really show that those people were likely to cause crimes.
Okay.
So that was one of the factors. The other factor was that the big increase in crime has been because there are three things that go into preventing crime. One is knowing that if you do a bad thing, you're going to get caught. Certainty that you're going to get caught. There's not that certainty. A lot of people are committing crimes.
no, can get away with
and
it.
they're getting away with it. So until that, then there's the fact that if you commit the crime, you have some the consequences will be commensurate with the crime that you've done. And then the third thing is that your sentence will be severe enough that it becomes an. So we're really focusing on how do we get the police to do a better job of catching criminals. And so we need more and better trained police. That's pretty clear. They reported during the session that in Santa Fe, and it's probably the same thing in Albuquerque, overnight in Santa Fe there were 3 police patrolling the entire city. So, in Albuquerque, there's more than 3, but it's a much bigger city. So
Actually, we didn't have that much more. I think there was a crime in the Northeast Heights in recent years, and they said that there were only 4. I think, okay. That was shocking.
It is a dilemma. But how do you attract them? And so we gave big raises to police, 17% to state police. All the other police got raises, and then we created an incentive fund to help retain police. If you're eligible to retire and you're willing not to retire for up to 5 additional years, you get incentive pay, trying to hang on to them, and then better training for police so that the ones that are out there feel like they really can handle the job and the demands of the job.
What? This was only a 30-day session?
It was, that was
impactful.
Yeah.
Right?
It really was. Yeah.
And I think a couple of the crimes, they were making it a crime for chop shops, to make it a crime to have a chop shop. And I think they removed removed the statute of limitation for second-degree murder.
Right. That was Representative Ream has been trying to do that for several years, and this year it got incorporated into that package, so that there's no statute of limitations on second-degree murder now.
Senator Gerald Ortiz, Pino, there's so much more, but we only have a minute left. There's so much more.
And it was an election year, as you mentioned. And so that colored a lot of what went on. And so a couple of things didn't get through, one of which was election reform. Some of the election reforms that were put into, there were 3 separate bills, and they combined them into one bill. The House passed it the last morning and sent it over to us at 10:30. And there was a morning-long filibuster carried on by one of the Republican senators that prevented us from ever getting back to it. So that's something in the future. We'll come back to some of those changes in the election laws that were proposed. And the clean fuel standards, we didn't get that through either. That was going to be a big clean air effort, and we didn't get that done. Same thing, we waited too long, got to the end, and it was easy to filibuster it and block it.
No special session this election year, I imagine.
I don't think so, not with an election. I mean, it's highly unlikely. There is a group that's already petitioning to start for a special session. We had 3 special sessions last year. We don't need, we had one on cannabis, we had the one on redistricting, and then we had the one how to spend the federal money.
This is so much. Thank you. Our time is run up, but we're going to have you back. We are going to discuss cannabis, and maybe we'll include it in that program a little bit about redistricting. So.
Good.
Thank you, Senator Gerald Ortiz Pino, for representing Albuquerque in the state legislature and also for being a part of our program.
Always glad to. Enjoy it.
Thank you. Thanks again for watching the show. I'm Diane Kinderwater. Make it a great week with your family.
In the Army National Guard, family means everything.
Our parents, they were really supportive that all 5 of us would join. I got my education because of the Guard. I got to travel a little bit and experience a whole different culture. It helped me get my job, helped me pay for my house. Being part-time really helped because I could have some opportunities that were still in education.
Serving part-time in the Army National Guard instills pride that you and your family will share. Visit NationalGuard.com to learn more about part-time service.
Issues and Answers with your host Diane Kinderwater is presented as a public service to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. To comment on today's program or to purchase a copy of any Issues and Answers program, visit sunbroadcasting.org or call us at 505-345-1991.